Hello, 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 y'all. I am fortunate enough to be here today with Jenny and Ivy, and they have a ton of knowledge in their brains that I'm going to be working to extract for the next 30 minutes to provide the information that they've got to the aspiring speakers, the professional speakers, and the entrepreneurs who speak to grow their business. Let's start with Jenny, and then we can move into Ivy. What are your creds to be here? Why are you so special?
Wow. I mean, that's never how I want to lead, but I will offer some of my experience. I got started in the industry as an agent at Speaker Spotlight. They are the biggest bureau in Canada. Fabulous humans. Loved my time there. Worked with them for a number of years before my family moved to LA, at which time I began working with Big Speak out of Santa Barbara, where I managed their exclusive roster of speakers solely for co-brokering, which means I was only booking their exclusives when another speakers bureau's client was looking to book them, which was a great way to get the lay of the land on the entirety of the industry. From there, I spent a brief time as an agent out of APB or with APB out of Boston before joining the Impact 11 team. At Impact 11, we are primarily a speaker development company, but in my first couple of years here, I was managing the practices of our four founding partners who are four very successful corporate speakers: Josh Linkner, Ryan Estes, Peter Sheehan, and Seth Madison. And I now head up our community of speakers and work with our bureau and manager friends in the space, bringing them to our live event. So that's what I do. I like to bring the people together. Those are my creds. Connection.
Awesome. And Ivy, what about you?
So my path is very similar to Jenny's. I've been on this journey for almost 25 years now, which is horrifying and wonderful. All at the same time, I started in my career working at the Washington Speakers Bureau, which is out of Washington, D.C., a very fascinating, storied bureau representing everyone from inspirational leaders you may never have heard of to world leaders you've definitely heard of. And so that was a very exciting ride to learn sort of anything and everything from all of them. So I had a great 17 plus year career there, and then moved over to a smaller, more boutique bureau out of New York called Gotham Artists. And that was a really exciting transition for me because I went from working off a roster of 200 exclusive speakers to no exclusive speakers by design. And so I got to learn about all kinds of new people that I had never worked with before and new speakers, and really broaden my connections and, knowledge of the industry there in a way that I hadn't done before, with all sorts of new challenges and new opportunities. And honestly, I caught the coaching bug over COVID. I am currently the director of coaching and speaker development at Impact 11, but it started just when we weren't booking a ton of events, and a lot of the speakers that I had become friends with were working on their content or working on their assets or working on their sites, and they were asking my opinion. And I found that those hours I spent with them on those ideas and those challenges were kind of the most fun I was having during the week. And so I decided to make my best hours my best days and my best mini hours. So now I am loving working with our community members and our clients in terms of making every aspect of their speaking business and thought leadership better.
We got a ton to work with there. I'm going to kind of lean on you two for this question. A lot of people that you guys come into contact with are literally the ideal listener of this podcast. What are some of the questions that they have that when they talk to you, they are looking to you guys and your authority to learn from, that you guys could share here, both the questions they're asking and the answers?
Oh, we get to interview ourselves. This is amazing.
So many questions they ask. So many questions.
I think it depends where they're at in the speaking journey they're on, right? We work with people who are just getting started. Perhaps they are entrepreneurs or executives who are contemplating dipping a toe into the speaking space. Or we work with people who've been doing this for 12 years and they're already earning $25,000 a speech and they have different questions. So maybe we'll start at the beginning with those who are kicking things off. We get a lot of questions about what people are supposed to talk about. I have this wealth of experience and I think I have a message, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. So a lot of it at the very beginning is about how to position oneself as a speaker and draw out the message that matters most to them, that they really want to share from the stage, and helping them understand that you want to share a message that is in service of an audience. You don't want to get up on stage simply because you have a wonderful story and you think people should hear from you. It's taking your expertise and shifting the perspective so that it becomes about the audience and how they're going to learn from you and why, what makes you relatable.
Yeah, to that end, I spend 7-8 hours a day answering these questions, which is really fun. But I think, with regard to positioning, that's the number one. And a lot of the questions that I get And it goes back to what Jenny was talking about with positioning, and it goes, even further into assets and things like that and sales techniques is, how do I break through? It's a massive market, but it's a crowded market. And a lot of the people that we work with, is the work we do with them is helping them take all of their collective experiences, either on the stage, off the stage, in life, in business, and help them discover their one of one and put that out into the world, because that is really the best to break through the noise and, go from I'm a sales speaker to I do X, Y, and Z and I'm on stage and you're not. It's how do you become that memorable one of one? And so a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the questions that we get are in service of that journey. And it is a journey. It's not a quick answer by any stretch, but most of what we do is around that.
I'd say we also spend a lot of time when you're working on differentiating yourself in looking at a bio you've written or looking at a speaking topic and playing the game of pulling your name out and putting someone else's in. And if you can do that without being able to notice the difference, then you haven't figured out how yet to be one of one.
Interesting. And what point after the speaker has their positioning solid, it's gotten the Jenny and the Ivy green check, is it right for them to go from the 5K, 7,500 speaker to that next level of, passing that 10 to go to that 15, 20, 25 range? Or is there not a jump and that's the wrong way to think about it?
I would say the jump is going to happen when the market tells you it's ready for the jump. So we talk a lot about this in terms of setting your fee and where it should live right now and where it should go. We talk about a 70% rule. Where can you win 70% of the time? So you want to think about how often you want to speak, how often you're being asked to speak, and how often you're winning those deals. And if you tick those boxes and you have more volume coming your way than you can handle at your current price point, you can start to think about bumping up to the next level. But you never want to forget that every time you move up, you're in a new group of competitors, and the higher your fee gets, the harder the competition becomes.
100% agree. I view pricing in the market, it is 100% about economics, in my opinion, 0% about ego. Yes, your credibility is going to drive things. We talk a lot about what we call the transfer fallacy, right, in our business. Whereas, for example, you may have been a super high-powered XYZ CEO or done amazing things at the top of your field in one area, but you are coming into this new field as a beginner in many, many ways. And so I tell speakers, it's to treat a speaking business like you are starting a brand new entrepreneurial venture. You're going to bring all of the information, all of the knowledge, all of the skills that you have from the other things that you've done to this new thing. But it is a bit of a starting over. And so that's why I say, when we're talking about fee, remove your ego from it, right? Where are you winning, right? I totally appreciate that you think you're a $150,000 speaker and you think that you should be flown all over Earth on a beautiful private jet with leather seats. I think the same thing. In reality, if you're getting that 70% of the time, good for you. Chances are we maybe need to step down and step up. And so you really want to think about other things aside. In this particular world, where am I? What steps do I need to take to get from this stage to the next stage? Because if you skip the steps, that's when you're going to get into trouble.
I love that. I'll also add one additional thing is we've certainly talked to speakers who say, I'm a $15,000 speaker. But the truth is they earned $15,000 to speak once. And although that's great and someone wanted to do that, if you are not constantly having people come to you who are looking to spend $15,000 on your keynote, you're not a $15,000 speaker. And it's just being really realistic and self-aware about where you are and where you're trying to go, but not jumping too quickly, because if you go too far too fast, you're never going to end up where you want to be.
Ryan, one more quick thing on that is that yes, it's about fee. There's a lot of ways when you're a new speaker and an up and coming speaker and a speaker who's working to get momentum. There are a lot of ways to get paid in this business. And it's not always with a monetary amount. You can get referrals, you can get videos, you can get introductions, right? You can get, meetings, whatever it is. Think of the different ways you can extract value that may not be in the form of monetary compensation, because some of those things are going to be, in the long run, going to be just as valuable as a $10,000 fee.
Right. And is there a point that a speaker goes from more outbound in looking for speaking gigs to a point where they get to enough credibility, enough referrals, enough word of mouth bubbling around that they pivot to, okay, now they're having to deflect gigs because they're getting so many offers and they have to increase the price? And what does that pivot point look like when they go from doing the outbound to becoming a warm inbound speaker? If that's an actual title, I don't actually know.
It is now.
That happens and then it stops. So you never get to stop selling yourself as a speaker because the momentum is your responsibility forever. So as your speaking practice evolves, you'll reinvent yourself time and time again. And you'll have moments, if things are going well, where the majority of the volume is inbound, and that's amazing. And you ride those and they feel great, but they're not eternal. So even those speakers who've been at this for a number of years and managed to create longevity in their businesses will never rest on inbound alone. And there are exceptions. If you are famous, that helps. If you have a best-selling book that stays at the top of the best-selling list for years on end, that helps. But for most people in the speaking arena, you don't get to sit back and only have inbound coming your way forever. Enjoy it while it lasts, but also continue to plant those seeds for future outbound opportunity because the competition is forever there and the industry continues to change. And you just want to make sure you stay relevant over time.
No, absolutely. I mean, after 25 years of selling speakers into the marketplace, I wasn't selling myself as a speaker, but selling speakers into the marketplace. It is absolutely a combination game of hunting and farming. You are always hunting, you are always farming, right? Planting those seeds, setting those long-term goals, but also you are out there hustling, you are getting your name out there. And the minute you take your eye off one of those, you're going to have a problem. And I've seen it, you get so busy, you're on the road, you're doing the things and everything's great, but you're not out there planting those seeds anymore. All you're doing is taking things in. All of a sudden it's going to dry up and you're going to come back and you're going to have an empty calendar. So the discipline that this requires is profound. And think of it as a discipline, right? 2 hours a day to inbound, 2 hours a day to social media, 2 hours a day to this, 2 hours a day to that. It is that level of consistency of effort that is going to maintain your longevity in this industry.
I will add one thing, and that is all 100% accurate. If you do reach a point where you are looking at more inbound than anything else, you might add to your team. So it doesn't mean that the speaker personally is responsible for every aspect of this business as it grows. You can keep it all for yourself, sure. But you may find that it is better to either have someone as a business manager in-house, or you work with a speaker manager, or you work more with bureaus where they're handling some of that for you. It doesn't mean it's not your responsibility, but you also want to ensure that you have the time to focus on your thought leadership and what you deliver from the stage, and ensuring that what you deliver continues to evolve over time and remain relevant in the market.
More niche specific question. I've been talking to a lot of podcasters and that I've just met at events, and they say, yeah, a lot of us were struggling to get from the kind of camera talk to in-person stages, but we really want to get into in-person stages. We just don't know how. What kind of guidance would you tell the podcaster that has a pretty significant audience and following already to take that step to bring it to in-person stages, whether it's their own events that they choose to organize or other people's events or not?
I would say part of it is putting the work into the craft of ensuring that they're comfortable and confident delivering a keynote from a stage and not only through a camera, because they're different mediums and the skill of being great on stage takes work. So I would invite them to get on as many stages as possible where they're maybe not even getting paid, just to put the reps in. Get good at it, capture footage, make sure it feels right, and that what's happening through a camera translates to the stage, the same way we talked about transfer fallacy. That can live there too. It is not easy to hold someone's attention from the stage for 45 to 60 minutes if you haven't done it before. So you want to get those reps in as often and everywhere that you possibly can, just recognizing the distinction between the two formats.
And I think in addition to that is, from listening to a number of podcasts, from you being a podcast host, the content on a podcast can be different than the content that is being sold into a marketplace for a corporate keynote presentation. That's different content. I mean, not only is the format different, the content may be different. And you really want to think, I always encourage all of our speakers to consider themselves thought leaders. You are thought leaders, which means you have leading thoughts. Whether you deliver those leading thoughts via an incredible podcast with millions of downloads, whether you deliver those leading thoughts on stages with audiences of hundreds and thousands of people, it's different ways of distributing your thought leadership. And each one of those, to Jenny's point, is a craft in and of itself, right? There are people who are probably great on delivering keynote speeches, but maybe they're not awesome at the Q&A in a podcast. It's a different format. So you really do have to hone each type of craft of delivery, whether it's doing interviews, podcasts, from the stage, or any other medium. It's the same thing. It's focus on the thought leadership and then focus on the skill. Your question about how do you get there? That's sort of the hard work of scouring the internet and putting in the work and making the phone calls. I don't know if anyone takes phone calls anymore, but I'm old enough to remember the days when we smiled and dialed. And at some point you just got to put pen to paper and get after it. So
I think if you are a podcaster or an influencer who has a lot of people who are already in your orbit, that's your market to start, right? You have the ability to go to those people and offer your time on stage because you've already built a relationship on social or by way of a podcast. And as a podcaster, you might want to start out on stage, to Ivy's point, doing a Q&A or some sort of fireside chat situation as opposed to a full keynote, because the work it takes to craft a keynote is substantial. You wouldn't want to immediately say, oh, this is my first time on stage, I'm going to speak for an hour. Think about the work that needs to go into that in order for it to go well, especially if you're looking for this to be a new avenue for your career and your thought leadership.
And for corporate keynote speaker, how much do you two recommend they should lean on their keynote and that being the content versus the audience engagement and interacting with the audience? Because if you have a keynote, normally there's a pretty rigid structure, if I understand correctly. But how much should they lean on the interacting with the audience to be part of their engagement versus the content in the keynote, if that kind of makes sense?
It does. I think it's changed. I think it used to be a one-way conversation and you just got up on stage and you delivered to or at the audience. That's no longer true. There are some people who do that, absolutely, but engaging the audience and being interactive and finding the moments where there's a break from delivery, jumping out into the crowd, using Mentimeter to do some sort of survey and get the audience feedback. I think all of that is in play within a keynote now.
It's
less polished.
More human. I think you still have to keep the polish for sure. But I remember when I was, again, I was very much part of that, people, they just get on stage, they talk for an hour, they get off stage, end of event. Right now, it's much more about the edutainment, right? That has been, I think, one of the biggest shifts that I've seen in my career is people absolutely want to be entertained almost more than they want to be educated. It's about a 50-50. And a lot of times too, it's the entertainment aspect that makes the education stick, right? And that's really what drives it home for people. Because again, I mean, you can look at the studies, you can look at whatever it is. We all have shorter attention spans than we used to. It's just how it works. So if you are going to keep your audiences engaged and learning, you have to work with how their brains are working. And that's quick hits of information. It's got to be quick. It's got to be sticky. It's got to be fun. And we're not quite to TikTok yet on stage, but you do have to make sure that you are giving them people breaks to reset and refocus. And that's something that if you can master that skill, and the level of interaction that you have is going to be individual to every speaker, right? Josh Linkner does not have the same level of interaction that Peter Sheehan does, to the same level of interaction that Mel Robbins does, or Terry Bradshaw. It's all different. It's what feels authentic to you. It's not something that can be forced, but is absolutely something that should be considered and incorporated in a very authentic way.
And it's also different depending on the audience, both who's in the audience and the size of the audience. The way you're going to do something interactive with a group of 50 isn't the same as 1,000, but that doesn't mean you won't get interactive with a larger audience. So all of these things have to be contemplated when you're crafting a keynote.
In the Tony Robbins event, UPW, Unleash Your Power Within, it's very, like, if you analyze it as a speaker and you analyze these entrepreneurial events, there's so much tactical NLP and strategy and storytelling behind the back end of every speech. So I believe it was, if I understood correctly, a person can pay attention to a story for 7 minutes. That if you start a new story every 7 minutes, they're pulled out, they go back in, they're pulled out, they go back in. So are there other strategies like 7-minute storytelling, keep the audience engaged with the TikTokification of our brains, for lack of a better term, to keep the audience on the edge of their seat? Like, what's next? I'm so curious. And they're with it. Do you two know any strategies that you would recommend other speakers to use?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I talk to our speakers about almost daily, right? And the way we approach it is that you want to have varied content modalities. And what do I mean by that? But what it is that you want to mix up the way that you engage with your audience. So maybe every 7 minutes, the first time you're telling a story, the second time you're showing a video clip, the third time you're doing a Mentimeter poll, the fourth 7 minutes you're doing a jump down in the audience or a share with your partner. I think it's the timing of the engagement is more important than the type of engagement. But when we get to the type of engagement, you got to mix it up. Don't keep telling a corporate story about a 30,000 plus person organization that's based in the United States. Maybe tell a story about a, tribe, an Aboriginal tribe, and what you can learn from that versus a kid's baseball game versus a Morgan Stanley offsite. Mix it up, right? And I think as much as you're mixing up the content, mix up the emotions that you're trying to elicit from the audience. Think about how you want them to feel. Maybe you really want them to get deep and get really introspective. What kind of story are you going to tell in that? Or maybe you want them to get excited. What video clip is going to get them absolutely cheering, rocking, bringing it back, right? Maybe from a hard moment. So really think about the different ways you engage, the different emotions that you're trying to elicit from your audience, and have the content and the interaction meet those moments.
Everything Ivy said. You really want to shape a keynote with a through line in mind, right? You want to think about the experience you're taking them through. And that does involve a number of emotions. It does require you to speak in a way where your voice modulates differently. If you just speak like a robot and everything you share sounds like this and the same emotion comes out of you and you stand in one place, that's not engaging. So it's how you perform, how you use your voice and your body and move and connect with the audience. There are some speakers who are so fabulous. Seth Madison is my favorite example of this. He makes every single person in the audience think he's speaking directly to them. That is a gift, and that takes work to get right, but it matters because it helps people remain engaged throughout. And you're earning their attention, 15 seconds at a time. This is a TikTok world at this point in time. So it is your responsibility to keep checking in and making sure the audience is still with. It's learning to be quick on your feet and knowing to make a shift if need be while you're up there. Even if you have your slides and you know that maybe you're supposed to go somewhere next, are you able to make changes on the fly to ensure that the audience stays with you? And there are just a lot of different ways to do that. It's also about experimentation, right? You're going to try an activity in a keynote one day and you think it's going to work and maybe it doesn't. And maybe you'll have a Q&A at the end and you'll find that people are asking a whole bunch of questions about something you're not even covering in your keynote. And you'll know where there was a content gap and you'll go in and find a new piece and add it the next time. So it is forever iterative. You'll never lock in your keynote and go, it's done. I'll do this the same way every single time for every single audience. You keep getting creative.
And I think to that point, we're talking about all this interaction. We're talking about how to keep audiences engaged. You can't do that if you don't have your keynote down cold. You have to know your stuff. 100% you have to know your stuff. And because you know your stuff, that's when you can play with the audience. That's when you can pay attention to the audience. That's when you can notice, all right, I'm losing that guy over here on the left, but you're still talking over here because you know your content, you know your mission and your goals for that speech so well, you can take your eye off that ball and focus on all of these other things around you. That is when mastery of the stage comes in. Peter Sheehan always tells us this great story that when he was learning how to be a speaker and working with coaches, he would go every Saturday morning, like early to this gentleman's office, and he would make him give his keynote to a brick wall, stand with his nose to a brick wall and deliver his full keynote. And then once he had that figured out, over and over and over again. And then once he had that figured out, I guess he put on headphones and he would blast Metallica, heavy metal music, and say, with this blasting and this level of distraction, you deliver the keynote without missing a beat, over and over and over again. You've got to get it in your bones because you can't do any of these other things effectively without having that level of muscle memory of the words that you are saying. And so it's so important. That's where I think, honestly, good speakers get separated from great speakers. It's that level of mastery and ability to work on the fly and iterate and experiment. That's really when that comes in. You talk about when are you going to make those jumps? That's a big jump.
There was a lot of speakers I've spoken to. They talk about how the audience won't always remember what you say, but they'll remember how you made them feel. So playing on that point, what % of the speaker's actual talk should be leaning on emotional variability within the talk? I was at an event in Atlanta right before I met you guys at DC, and the talk that won the top vote was not the one that had the most amazing story or the best content. It was the one that took the audience on a journey from feeling highs of highs to lows of lows to making them laugh to making them do this. And then after, I remember I asked someone, so what did she actually speak about? I said, I don't remember. I just remember how she made me feel. It was this, I felt this, I felt this. And that was so interesting to me. So how much should a speaker kind of lean into, but making the audience feel so many different emotions to have that talk resonate with them?
Great question. It depends on what you talk about and who you're talking to, right? If you've been hired to come in and rework an organization's corporate strategy, you're more tactical and strategic than you are emotional. If you are someone who has been through tremendous hardship and you're speaking about resilience and an ability to relate to hard life experience and ensuring people know that they can do it too, emotion is more involved. I think every speaker should consider emotion when putting together a keynote because it is about how the people in the audience feel. In a perfect world, a speech ends and you don't just think about how you feel, you also know what was shared. And you have some ideas and thought on what you're going to do next to continue to feel what you're feeling. So you really want to put those two things together. It shouldn't be one or the other, but the amount that you play, I don't want to say play with emotion because again, that feels false, but the amount that emotion plays into it does have to do with what your topic is.
I think for all the speakers that we work with, if the reviews came back and said, oh my God, he made me laugh, he made me cry, but I have no idea what he said, they would consider that a massive miss. Just because every speaker that we work with, most of the speakers that I know, they want to take you on that emotional journey in order to move you to action. And it's that last piece of moving to action that really is where the impact comes in. And, we actively have clients calling us. We actively have speakers coming to us saying, I don't want a sugar high, right? If I'm going to invest $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 return on investment, I need an ROI here. And that comes with the emotions. Again, you remember how you feel, but you also along the way have to remember the steps in order to do better, be better, sell better, strategize better, whatever that is.
In the corporate speaking space, you need to provide clear takeaways for an audience. So if you're selling yourself as a speaker, you're talking to a meeting planner or directly to the client, they want to know what the audience is going to get out of this. What transformation will they experience, both how they feel and how they will act in future? Because that's a lot easier to sell to your CFO when you're trying to get the budget to book a speaker. So it has to be both.
And for the entrepreneur that's also a speaker and they're debating going into full-time speaking, but they also love their business, but they also love speaking, there's probably a lot of people you guys have worked with that have had that kind of decision when they kind of lean on you guys for guidance and say, hey, I love both. I love the impact of the business, but I also love the speaking. It's addictive. I love that feeling when I get off stage and interacting with the audience. How do you help them make that decision or provide clarity to make that decision for themselves normally?
We hear this a lot. And I think the truth of the matter is every individual has to make that decision for themselves. But what we talk about a lot at Impact 11 is that there are different versions of success for all speakers. So you don't have to be a full-time speaker to be a great speaker. You can speak 12 times a year while running a business if that's what you want. If you want to be a road warrior and speak 70 times a year, it's going to be a lot harder to run your company, but it is a choice that you have to make at some point in time. You do not have to be one or the other unless you feel the need to be all in on one and not the other. You can be a fantastic speaker who is also a coach, a consultant who runs a company. It's just going to depend how often you want to be on stage.
I think that what Jenny said about understanding your personal definition of success is the most critical part of that, right? You can be a full-time working mom and a keynote speaker. You can be a 5-time entrepreneur and be a great speaker. So you really just have to define what success looks like for you. Jenny and I, our role is to help ask the questions to get you to the answer. We can't tell you what that looks like, but we help you dig in and realize, maybe 6 months into the year, you call us and you're like, I'm completely burnt out. I'm like, well, then you said you wanted to do 60 gigs a month. Maybe it's not so much. Maybe it's 4 or 5, right? And so our job is to sort of just be a sounding board and a guide to help you get to where you want to be. And wherever you want to be, whatever that definition of success looks like for you, that's what we're going to help you achieve.
A lot of times you hear a phrase spoken, some of those successful people, they see where the puck is going before it gets there. So to help the people listening, for each of the 3 target audiences, the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, and the entrepreneur that speaks to other business, what is one problem that person will have at that stage and a solution to that problem so they kind of can see where the puck is going in that part of their life and have a solution prepared for it before they even encounter the problem from you guys?
I think you have to put yourself in a position to win the work you want to win, right? Like part of that is where, as I was saying before, and what your version of success is and where you want to go. It's like getting there ahead of the puck, the Gretzky quote. As a speaker, you do have to take the time to figure out what this path looks like for you and why you're doing it. And you have to make that choice. And you might change your mind as you get going. But ultimately, as the thought leader, you have to make the choices about why you get on stage, what you share, who you want to share it with. You can get a whole lot of opinions from so many of us, and we will happily weigh in with our expertise, but you have to be true to you and know why you're getting up there and who you'd like to engage with and what sort of impact you'd like to have.
What I would say is sort of, I think the things at every level where I see people get tripped up is that they simply do not anticipate how hard this is and how much work this actually requires in order to be great at it. And it is consistency of practice. It is consistency of thought leadership. It is consistency of evolution and development. And I think people just think you write a speech and someone asks you to give it and you give it and that's the thing. And, or if you're, moving up in the world and it's like, oh my gosh, I just got listed on a bureau website. And all of a sudden, Beyonce is going to show up to drive your kids to school and money's going to rain from the heavens. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. This is a hard business. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Can you make global impact? Absolutely. Can you make impact in your communities? Absolutely. But it is hard. And I think that's the number one thing people need to remember is that you are taking on a very challenging endeavor. But if you can make it work, it is absolutely worth it.
That is powerful, Ivy. And thanks for sharing that too, Jenny. For these people, I know we're short on time here. This might have answered the question, but I always wrap up every guest appearance with this question. What is one piece of advice from your decades of experience that you would give to the aspiring speaker, the professional speaker, or the entrepreneur that speaks to grow their business?
Be yourself.
Awesome.
It's my number one. It's always be exactly who you are and get on stage because you have something to share that you feel compelled to share with the world. Don't make it about you, but be you.
That's so good. Jenny, you took mine. I love that. Not fair. But I think it goes back to what I just said, is that this is hard, but it's worth it. So one of my favorite lines from Ryan Estes, he closed us out at a boot camp once with this. And if you've got a message on your heart, you can make a pretty serious dent in the universe if you just keep after it. And I think to Jenny's point of you being you, there is no one way to do this. With anything in life, learn the rules, learn the lay of the land, and make it your own. Because that really, it's about becoming one of one. And once you can figure out how to do that, it's an industry ripe for innovation and experimentation, just like any other. And I say, bring your whole self and go for it.
Boom. Drop the mic for both of y'all. Let's say I'm a listener here and I've been listening. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, these ladies are dropping so much value. Where can I put a smaller version of them in my pocket? Where can they find you guys online?
Excellent question. We are both part of Impact 11. So it is at impact_11 on Instagram. Personally, I'm at Jenny DeRosse, exactly as my name appears. And LinkedIn, all the fun places. No personal website. This is the joy of being a piece of building our Impact 11 community. You can find me there.
Yes, you can find me, I2 Impact 11. We keep our email handles simple, first name at impact11.com. I am not as user-friendly, I guess, on Instagram, but if you throw my name in there, the handle is actually Copper Top Mama for all of the obvious reasons, 3 teenagers and very red hair. So, and I used to run really fast. So, not so fast anymore, but we still get out there every now and again. But we would love to connect with anybody. We put on events all over the country, all year long, and we would love to chat with anyone. We have been in this industry for decades for a reason. We love it. It's what we do. And we would be so happy to bring anybody along with us.
Well, both you guys, I know you're up to a lot of stuff, so I appreciate you guys taking your time to actually be here and make this happen. And if you guys are listening here and you just listened to what Jenny and Ivy shared, and you've got a friend or a colleague or a coworker who's got that bug in them that they need to speak, but they just don't really know how to get that past that ceiling of the fear of public speaking, these two know how to do it. So if you think they find this valuable, please share this with them. All right, guys, thanks for listening and cheers, y'all.
Thanks for having us, Ryan.